So you say you grew up in the faith, but your story is a little bit different than mine. I mean, I grew up as a pastor's kid, kind of right here in quintessential New England town. You grew up somewhere totally different.
Yeah, so I grew up in Thailand. I am a
Okay.
missionary kid. My parents are Bible translators.
MKPK.
Yes,
Okay, I
so
got you.
similar in a lot of ways. I think I had a lot of pride actually going in to get my theology degree because I was like, hey, my parents are Bible translators. I know everything about
I already
studying
know
the
this,
Bible.
yeah.
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 And so actually it was my familiarity with scripture that stopped me from going deeper often.
Oh,
And
wow.
that is kind of like a different story. I think a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
are confused or, they're really struggling to get into the scriptures because they're like, oh, it's just intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Mine was, I know this.
Yeah.
And so then I got into this class and I didn't know anything.
Oh,
and that was just
jeez.
like, oh no,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought that I knew how to apply the scriptures, but that's
Right.
what really set me on the journey of like, then the Lord showed me and humbled me
Yes.
how much
Yeah.
I had to learn. And now I'm like, okay, let's step back. I really know nothing, I'm just
Yeah.
learning. I'm a learner.
So what drove you to go get your degree?
Yeah. So actually I was watching other people online. I had moved to New Hampshire. I was miserable. I was struggling so much at home. I was newly pregnant.
You told me this years ago.
Yes. And so I had wanted to dance. I mean, that's what I wanted to do. And so I had gone off to New York City. I was going to do Broadway. I had all these hopes and dreams. And my whole life I wanted to dance. And so I get to New Hampshire. There's no dance. I'm pregnant. And then also it's a small town in New England, which means that culturally
Yeah.
there wasn't local Thai food. There wasn't a bunch of different diverse nationalities. And I just felt like, who am I?
Yeah.
And so it was in that season, I just started writing out of my misery and I started posting online. And so what I did was I'd be like, okay, I just go to the word every day and I'd be like, Lord, I'm just struggling so much. And I'd learned so much from the scriptures that I would post it. And then I started to naturally grow a following of people who were like, okay, she's very vulnerable. She's very authentic. She's struggling too.
Wow.
And so I wasn't ever trying to start a ministry. It was just like, this is where I'm at, guys. And I don't know what to do, but God is providing and he's helping me through it. And so that actually started posting, was realizing other people were taking things out of context, but I couldn't articulate why and how.
Oh.
And so I would just be like, that's not accurate. And so I'd go
Yeah.
to my mom and she'd be able to articulate it. And then I'd find another post, Mom, this isn't accurate. And I knew because I grew up in the faith, it wasn't accurate. I just couldn't voice or articulate how.
How or why? Yeah.
And so that's what really seminary did for me was then I was able to articulate what I was already seeing. But at that point, I couldn't have told you.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So, but what's really neat about what you just shared is God used you called it misery, but your season of like almost self-discovery in a way. How am I going to live here in quintessential New England without all this stuff? And God used that to minister to people, which I think I would love to hear. Like, is there like a specific story of like a person reaching out, or is it more of just you started seeing lots of people resonating with what you were saying?
I think I just saw so many people resonating, like messaging me and saying, when you posted that, that's where I'm at. Thank you for being so vulnerable and authentic about where you're at. And I think often, this is a leadership podcast, but often it's out of our painful places that people can then see themselves in those places and then you can encourage them. And so I think one of the biggest things I think about leadership is being authentic and being vulnerable and being real and not saying, I have all this together. That's where I was at. I didn't have everything together. And that's what really made people get drawn to what I was saying.
Yeah, authenticity is kind of a buzzword right now.
Yeah.
I just was talking to my friend Hannah. She was saying the same thing. She's like, people are just seeming to look for space for presence and just, that whole idea of someone being authentic with them, because that opens these doors. So that really kind of answers our first question, which was, how has your faith influenced your approach to leadership? Are you seeing that now changing or is it staying the same for you?
No, I definitely think it's every new season. I've been in a really hard season again. And I think every new season, it's inviting the scriptures, inviting God, that relationship that you have to speak into anything you're going through. And then really sharing that with other people is where I've been at in my journey of ministry.
Oh, it's so good though. So let me ask you this, who, because Bill and I talk about this, this is a leadership podcast. And one of the things we talk about quite a bit is who really has been the most influential in our lives. And I would love to hear your answer to this question. Who are one or two people that you've kind of looked to for leadership in your own life?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question, and the first people that came to mind was actually my parents.
Okay.
And the reason for that was privately, I got to see how they acted and it wasn't different than publicly. So I think
Wow.
when you think about a lot of leaders, there's a lot of sometimes hypocrisy or hidden sin or secrets, or maybe their family would say something different than what they would say publicly about them. And I see this all the time. And I think when I look at my parents growing up with them, they were exactly how they were in front of anybody else. And so that really drove me to want to emulate them. And I think a lot about leadership is imitation. So I wanted to imitate them in the way that they had this wellspring of life in which anything they were struggling with, whether it was emotionally, something painful, they went to the Lord with it. And then that they resolved with the Lord before it came out, and it didn't come out on us as a family. And so it really was the way that they led was authentic and vulnerable and with Christ, allowing him to speak into those spaces in their hearts. And then they were able to lead publicly. And I never felt like there was a difference.
So for you, it seems like this is extremely scriptural. I mean, follow me as I follow Christ is what I think Paul wrote.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, we talk a lot about here on this podcast is more is caught than taught. So it sounds like for you growing up, you're able to see in real time, this is what character looks like. This is what integrity is. So that's just wonderful.